I'm about to change the way you garden, or at least I'm going to try to. Now for us gardeners at the moment, it's all systems go. We're sowing, we're planting, we're watering, we're weeding. There is so much to do. And it's very easy for us to become tied down doing productive things. And don't get me wrong, every single thing that you do in the garden will to some degree contribute to a highly productive garden. But I think there's one thing missing out, and there's a skill I've been practicing recently, and but I'm getting some quite amazing benefits from it. And it's a brilliant thing to do when we're feeling busy and lots need to be done. I think it's important to also look at a slightly different way of approaching how we do our gardening. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what that skill is and also the benefits, and give you some real examples, which I think all of you should consider if you're not currently doing it at the moment. I believe for me, the most important skill to improve my gardening, and perhaps also yours, is to observe, specifically to observe more closely. And this links into a permaculture principle, which is to observe and interact. And I think this is great, and I love permaculture, and permaculture is a way of looking at how nature works and how we can get designs or ideas or systems from nature to create things like gardens that work really well and don't rely on loads of external sources. And observation and interaction is an interesting principle of permaculture, but I want to focus more on the observation. And stick with me here, because I honestly believe it's going to really help transform the way that you garden, and also perhaps be the missing link to you having a more highly productive garden. A quote that fits in nicely with this by Stanley Kubrick is, "Observation is a dying art." And the world is so fast paced at the moment, and it's really difficult and hard to just stop and look at what's happening. And I think in springtime and summertime in the garden, it can be similar. And by observing your growing space in silence, it allows your mind to wander. And a wandering mind forges the best ideas and understandings. The good news is you don't have to spend hours staring in one spot, because I'm very impatient myself. I can't sit still for more than a few minutes. So I'm going to show you the technique that I use to observe and better understand my space, so I can forge new understandings, but also new ideas, which are going to have transformative impacts both in the short term, but also in the long term of the garden. And this technique takes no longer than 5 minutes. So, how can you practice and eventually master the skill of observation? Well, they say it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill, so that's a lot of cups of tea, and I'm very much in the practice stage. And the first thing you've got to do is to have a bit of a mind shift. And I think as gardeners, or at least this is from a personal experience, we like to control, or I like to control, everything that's happening in the garden. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that it's okay to let things just take the natural course and the natural path, and just to observe what happens, rather than constantly having to try and have a say or control everything that goes on. For example, many sites will say that you need to harvest all of your leeks by the start of March. And I thought, no, I'm going to leave the leeks in, and it's mid-April, and I've still got quite a few usable leeks left over, and only a few have gone to seed. And I think rather than following common advice, it's good to just try things differently and have that excitement with what could happen. And that enjoyment is actually a huge part of my gardening now. And in case you were wondering about the specific leek variety, it's Musselburgh or Musselburgh. I'm not even sure how you pronounce it. The idea of just sitting back and observing rather than trying to go in and make adaptations and changes links in very well with the next part of this technique, and this is to find an area of the garden where you're going to sit down and look at for just 5 minutes. Doesn't need to be longer, but take a hot drink. So just sit there and sip your hot drink and just look at that area for 5 minutes. Now, if you do want to look more closely at something, it's okay to get up, have a little look, but then return to your seat. Don't do anything. It's a very hands-off, eyes-on approach. And just by sitting down and looking, it creates some really strong connections, and also you have that space in your mind to think and to dream and see the potential in things. And after that 5 minutes is up, which I usually use a 5-minute timer on my phone, I then have a notebook handy and I'll capture all of the thoughts and ideas and understandings that I have of that specific area. I'm now going to show you an example so you can see how this skill works and also how effective it is. So I've just been looking at this part of the garden, and firstly, actually standing here, I can feel that this is where all the wind funnels into. So that's a useful realization. The next thing is I firstly noticed the dandelions, and I just thought that that was nice, and it was just a thought that I wrote down. I also thought that would there perhaps be space for another trailing berry, but then I realised that this loganberry next year will go over to this year. That's the way we prune it, so I don't need to worry about that. I also thought that perhaps this corner would be a nice space for potential water storage, a water butt. I had a quick look just to see if there's any way of attaching a gutter, and I think it could be possible, so I wrote that down. That could be a nice job for winter. I also thought this loganberry here needed a home, so I wrote down I need to find someone who would like to have that loganberry, and I also thought finally that there was this blank space that has never ever been used, but it'd be really nice to perhaps build a mini raised bed to either train up here some could be some dwarf peas, or I could just make kind of a flower border, just things like that. And again, I only spent 3 minutes, but I felt like I know this space. It feels a lot more familiar now, because very often when you're looking at the whole garden, you miss out on the finer details. So the whole garden feels familiar, but when you then go to the actual parts, at first they can be unfamiliar, but it's like, oh yeah, I know this space a lot better now. And it means that when I am planning the garden as well in the future, I know a lot more about the story of this area. What I love about this exercise is that it only takes a few minutes to complete, and you could even do it when you're having your tea break. And the great thing about this exercise as well is that you get some really good ideas because you've given yourself that space to think and mull over and wonder about things. And I doubt that I'll ever do all of the ideas that I think of, and also during spring and summer we're pretty busy, but at least you have those ideas captured on paper. So when it comes to autumn and winter, and perhaps it's more infrastructure based ideas, you then have the time to plan and to implement those ideas. But I just think that having a little bit of breathing space during the busy growing part of the year is going to give you a lot of benefits. And I found from my own personal experience, if I just spend a bit more time thinking and observing about doing something and then doing it, the doing part is going to be a lot more effective. Now, how often should you do this 5-minute exercise? I think perhaps 1 or 2 parts of your garden a week. It doesn't need to be any more. You could even do 1 a month. It really doesn't matter. I think as well though, what you have to bear in mind is that it takes a bit of practice, like any skill. If you're going to learn a piano, at first you're just lost, and the hardest part is getting started, but then over time you gradually progress and improve and it becomes easier. It's almost building a habit. But if you start with 1 or 2 5-minute exercises a week, looking at different parts of the garden, writing down those understandings and ideas, I guarantee by the end of it you'll come up with some pretty, not life-changing, but almost garden-changing ideas and understandings that are going to make you and your garden a lot more productive and free up a lot more of your time to really relax and enjoy the quietness and the tranquility of gardening. And before I show you one more example of the observation exercise and the results of that particular observation, I just want to tell you about an online course that I've got coming out most probably on the 2nd of May. It's called more food, less effort. Simple systems for a highly productive garden. And I believe the most important element of any garden is you, the gardener. And this course is designed for you, the gardener, not so much the garden, because I believe if we as gardeners are efficient and productive and we're armed with all of those skills, then ultimately the garden is going to be that as well. So it's an online course all about how to make your gardening and your time and energy management a lot more efficient and productive, so you can really gain the benefits, because there's only so much planting techniques that you can do to increase abundance. I really believe that the real change happens when you see the garden as a whole system, and it's kind of related to this video as well. So that's enough blabbling about it. If you want to check it out on my new project, the Abundance Academy, see that online course, there's a sign up to the newsletter down below. So this is the shadiest part of the garden and usually the wettest because of these big sycamore trees, and this is more of a perennial bed, so there isn't really much I can do here to change, although I realised that the rhubarb divisions are looking nice and healthy, so that's great. I then my mind started wandering towards the corner, because we naturally like to look towards corners and focal points, and it was drawing me in. And I noticed that we got trellis all the way along here, but it stopped. And I thought to myself, hang on a minute, why can't I extend it? I could go all the way if I wanted to, and because I'm interested in perennial vegetables, there's a perennial climbing spinach that I'm really interested in that likes partial shade. So I thought if I could put a trellis here and maybe make a slightly small raised bed, I could grow it up, I can make use of this space. And just having a bit of time to daydream and think about that is really nice. I dropped my pen. I also felt I had a quick look at the other side, and there's a bit of space there, and I thought that would be a lovely place to put a load of sticks and make a bit of a habitat pile for a load of insects, maybe if a hedgehog wants to go and stay there for the winter. And apart from that, that was about it. But again, 4 or 5 minutes. The most exciting part is the project here of this space, and letting myself just think. You know, I kind of go in with that attitude of, oh, I doubt I'll think of anything. I've spent years here. But every time you look at it, also through the year, you almost see it through a different pair of eyes. So I really hope you found this video useful. And I know it's different, but I've got really interested in different ways of approaching how to make a garden more productive. So I want to wish you the best of luck with practicing and mastering your skills of observation, so you can generate those ideas and understandings that are going to make your garden a lot more productive. So go for it, and if you need to find out anything else about this technique, let me know down below in the comment section. And I've also included timestamps down below in the comment section, so if you want to rewatch particular parts of this video, then you can do it really easily. Thank you so much. Don't forget to sign up to the newsletter, and I'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.